So Keir Starmer is currently out in the garden in Downing Street. I have to say, as much as I'm not a fan of the guy, it does look a lot more cheery than when Rishi Sunak was out there announcing the general election on the front steps of Downing Street, being absolutely soaked in the rain. So he's got a nice day for it, but the contents of his speech are not quite so nice because he is just setting up all of the excuses to do all the dodgy things that we don't want him to do when Parliament goes back next week. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
I stood on the steps of Downing Street just over there 2 months ago. I promised that this government would serve people like you, apprentices, teachers, nurses, small business owners, firefighters, those serving our community and our country every day. I promised that we would get a grip on the problems that we face and that we would be judged by our actions, not by our words. I said before the election, and I say it again really clearly today, growth, and frankly by that I do mean wealth creation.
I'm sorry, but you're not going to create growth and wealth creation if you push all of the millionaires and successful businessmen out of the country by raising their taxes even more. I mean, Britain has had, I think it's second to China, only the number of millionaires leaving the country in 1 year. I think we had 9,500 leave the country in 1 year. I think that was last year. So the people who are going to create the wealth, they're all buggering off. Now that you're in power, even more of them are going to go.
Is the number one priority of this Labour government. And that's why in our first few weeks we've set up the National Wealth Fund, because we want every person and every community to benefit. It's why we've unlocked planning decisions, because we're going to build 1.5 million new homes. It's why we set up Great British Energy to create good jobs and cut people's bills. And it's why we ended the national strikes that have crippled our country for years. Because I defy anyone to tell me that you can grow the economy when people can't get to work because the transport system is broken, or can't return to work because they're stuck on an NHS waiting list. We've done more in 7 weeks than the last government did in 7 years.
Wait, hold on. He's spent the past few weeks just focusing on clamping down on free speech and chucking, Deborah, who's put up a post on Facebook saying that she doesn't like immigrants, chucking her in prison. That's what you've been proactively doing for the past 7 weeks. I mean, fine, I'll call you proactive, but not exactly on the right things.
And these are just the first steps towards the change that people voted for, the change that I'm determined to deliver. But before the election, I also gave a warning. I said change would not happen overnight. When there's a deep rot at the heart of a structure, you can't just cover it up. You can't just tinker or rely on quick fixes.
Oh, the weird anecdotes
are
coming out.
You have to overhaul the entire thing. Tackle it at root, even if it's harder work and takes more time.
Boris was much better at anecdotes in his speeches, but his were far more hilarious, I have to say.
The rot returns in all the same places, and it spreads worse than before. You know that, I know that, and that's why this project has always been about fixing the foundations of our country. But I have to be honest with you, things are worse than we ever imagined.
I have to say, I don't think fixing the foundations is the best
£22 billion black hole in the public finances. And before anyone
Stop
says,
the boat sounded better.
oh, this is just performative or playing politics, let's remember the OBR did not know about it. They wrote a letter setting that out. And they didn't know because the last government hid it. And even last Wednesday, just last Wednesday, we found out that thanks to the last government's recklessness, we borrowed almost £5 billion more than the OBR expected in the last 3 months alone. That's not performative, that's fact. But as well as the things that we've discovered, we've also seen shocking scenes across the nation. A mindless minority of thugs who thought that they could get away with causing chaos, smashing up communities and terrifying minorities, vandalising and destroying people's property, even trying to set fire to a building with human beings inside it. And as if that wasn't despicable enough, people displaying swastika tattoos, shouting racist slurs on our streets, Nazi salutes at the cenotaph, the very place we honour those who gave their lives for this country, desecrating their memory under the pretence, and it is a pretence, of legitimate protest. Now they're learning that crime has consequences, that I won't tolerate a breakdown in law and order under any circumstances, and I will not listen to those who exploit grieving families and disrespect local communities.
Hang on. He says that he will not allow a breakdown of law and order under any circumstances, but I don't see him absolutely dismayed calling for the shutdown of Notting Hill Carnival after we saw a bunch of people get stabbed, as usual, as happens pretty much every single year there, right? You don't see anywhere near the kind of response to the stuff going on at Notting Hill Carnival as you see to the riots. I'm sorry, but you are two-tier Keir. Stop saying, oh, it's the same under any circumstance. I'm sorry, but we can all read through the bullshit, Keir Starmer.
But these riots didn't happen in a vacuum. They exposed the state of our country, revealed a deeply unhealthy society, the cracks in our foundations laid bare, weakened by a decade of division and decline, infected by a spiral of populism which fed off cycles of failure of the last government. Every time they faced a difficult problem, they failed to be honest. They offered the snake oil of populism, which led to more failure, round and round and round, stuck in the rut of the politics of performance. I saw the beginning of that downward spiral firsthand back in 2011, when riots ripped through London and across the country. I was then Director of Public Prosecutions. And when I think back to that time, I see just how far we have fallen. Because responding to those riots was hard. Of course it was. But dealing with the riots this summer was much harder. Back in 2011, I didn't doubt that the courts could do what they needed to do. This time, to be honest with you, I genuinely didn't know. Let me tell you this, every day of that disorder, literally every day, we had to check the precise number of prison places and where those places were to make sure that we could arrest, charge and prosecute people quickly. Not having enough prison places is about as fundamental a failure as you can get. And those people throwing rocks, torching cars, making threats,
Writing on Facebook.
they didn't just know the system was broken. They were betting on it, gaming it. They thought, they'll never arrest me. And if they do, I won't be prosecuted. And if I am, I won't get much of a sentence. They saw the cracks in our society after 14 years of failure, and they exploited them. That's what we've inherited. Not just an economic black hole, a societal black hole. And that's why we have to take action and do things differently.
Oh yeah, it's just kids thinking that they can take advantage of a broken system, thinking we won't be arrested because there are no police on the streets. Oh yeah, nothing to do with the fact that you've got all these communities with huge grievances about mass migration, places like Rotherham that he even mentioned there, where you had the migrant hotel being broken into and a bit of a fire being started outside. Oh, they're just racists trying to take advantage of a broken system. They haven't got any grievances about the fact that their town has been ridden with grooming gangs for decades and nobody did anything about it or listened to them, and then they opened up a bunch of migrant hotels as well to make it even less safe than it already was. Okay, Keir Starmer.
And part of that is being honest with people.
You're not
about
honest
the
with people.
choices that we face, how tough this will be. And frankly, things will get worse before they get better. I didn't want to release prisoners early. I was chief prosecutor for 5 years. It goes against the grain of everything I've ever done. But to be blunt, if we hadn't taken that difficult decision immediately, we wouldn't have been able to respond to the riots as we did.
Oh no, you wouldn't have been
And if we
able
don't
to
take
lock
tough
up
action
all those
across the
people for
board,
writing on Facebook.
we won't be able to
Oh,
fix the
no.
foundations of the country as we need. I didn't want to means test the winter fuel payment, but it was a choice that we had to make, a choice to protect the most vulnerable pensioners while doing what is necessary to repair the public finances.
Flip-flop Keir.
Because pensioners also rely on a functioning NHS, good public transport, strong national infrastructure. They want their children to be able to buy homes. They want their grandchildren to get a good education. So we have made that difficult decision to mend the public finances so everyone benefits in the long term, including pensioners. Now that is a difficult trade-off, and there will be more to come. I won't shy away from making unpopular decisions now if it's the right thing for the country in the long term. That's what a government of service means. This shouldn't be a country where people fear walking down their street, their TVs showing cars and buildings being set on fire. This shouldn't be a country where the Prime Minister can't guarantee prison places. This shouldn't be a country where people are paying thousands more on their mortgages or waiting months for hospital appointments they desperately need, where our waters are filled with sewage, where parents worry that their kids won't get the opportunities that they did, where nothing seems to work anymore. So when I talk about the inheritance the last government left us, the £22 billion black hole in our finances,
That we had no idea
that
about.
isn't about a line on a graph. That's about people's lives, your lives. And the Tories are still not being honest. They know their recklessness cost them the election, but they won't accept the cost that they've inflicted on the country. And they won't apologise for what they've cost you. They're just still thinking about themselves.
That is kind of true.
Now, this government won't always be perfect. But I promise you this, you will be at the heart of it, in the forefront of our minds, at the centre of everything that we do. And that's why I wanted to invite you here today, to show that decent, hard-working people who make up the backbone of this country belong here. This is a government for you. A garden and a building that were once used for lockdown parties. Remember the pictures just over there of the wine and the food. Well, this garden and this building are now back in your service. It's not just that the last government relied on easy gimmicks and bad ideas. Those things happened precisely because the government itself lost its focus on the hopes and ambitions of working people. During those recent riots, I made huge asks of the police and of the criminal justice system.
Yeah, he asked them to
People already
monitor
stretched to the
Facebook all
limit.
day.
They knew I was making big asks of them, and I'm not going to apologise for it. But let me tell you this. They delivered. They deserve our gratitude. And that's why I went to Southport, to Lambeth, to Belfast, to thank them personally, to shake the hands of the first responders who rose up to the ask I was making of them. They deserve a government that trusts them, supports them, and works with them. That is the sort of government that we will be. One that works with people, not does things to them. One that believes in hard graft, not gimmicks. Honest about the challenges we face and working tirelessly to fix them. And that is how we will always work. Now, next week, Parliament returns. The business of politics will resume. But it won't be business as usual, because we can't go on like this anymore. Things will have to be done differently. We will do the hard work to root out 14 years of rot, reverse a decade of decline, and fix the foundations. Between now and Christmas, we will carry on as we've started, action, not words. We will introduce legislation and take decisions to protect taxpayers' money, to take on the blockers by accelerating planning to build homes
money. You
and
said you were
boost
raising
growth.
taxes.
We will forward this autumn to harness the full potential of AI for growth and for the public good. We'll bring rail service into public ownership, putting passengers first. The biggest levelling up of workers' rights in a generation to give people security, dignity and respect at work. And Great British Energy will be owned by the taxpayer, making money for the taxpayer.
Paid for.
Producing clean energy and creating good jobs. That is our focus for the rest of the year. But I will be honest with you.
Socialism. Okay, great.
There is a budget coming in October. And it's going to be painful. We have no other choice, given the situation that we're in. Those with the broadest shoulders should bear the heavier burden. And that's why we're cracking down on non-dogs.
You're going to push out of the country.
Those who made the mess should have to do their bit to clean it up. And that's why we're strengthening the powers of the water regulator and backing tough fines on the water companies that let sewage flood our rivers, lakes and seas. But just as when I responded to the riots, I'll have to turn to the country and make big asks of you as well.
Give us all your money.
To accept short-term pain for long-term good. The difficult trade-off for the genuine solution. And I know that after all that you have been through, that is a really big ask and really difficult to hear.
Oh, please, taxpayers.
That is not the position we should
70% of
be
your
in.
income. We're going to take all of it. But it's all because it's going to be good in the long run. Don't worry.
But we have to end the politics of the easy answer that solves nothing. But I also know that we can get through this together. Because the riots didn't just betray the sickness, they also revealed the cure, found not in the cynical conflict of populism,
but in locking up
coming
people
together
for
of a
Facebook
country.
posts.
The people who got together the morning after, all around the country, with their brooms, their shovels, their trowels, and cleared up their community. They reminded us who we really are. I felt real pride in those people who cleaned up our streets, rebuilt the walls, repaired the damage. And I couldn't help thinking about the obvious parallels. Because imagine the pride we will feel as a nation when, after the hard work of clearing up the mess is done, we have a country that we have built together, built to last, that belongs to every single one of us.
Right, I can't listen to him any longer. He's droned on for 20 minutes already now, and it's just the same old bibble babble. But I'm not going to keep you guys much longer because we've already listened to him for such a long time. But I just want to talk about very briefly that point he's making about the budget here. You know, this whole ramble that he's been doing for 20 minutes, he was just setting himself up to make all the excuses for that point where he says the budget is going to be not just hard, he said painful. It's going to be painful. But it's all going to be okay because it's short-term pain for long-term gain. So they're basically saying, although in the election we said it's all going to be rosy, we're going to fix everything, you're all going to be wealthier, you're all going to be happier, as soon as you get us in power, all will be okay. They've now come into power and they've gone completely the opposite way. And they've said, we're going to make your lives miserable. But they are trying to keep us on board by saying, don't worry, there's light at the end of the tunnel. And I don't think there's going to be light at the end of the tunnel, to be honest, because they think that the answer to fixing the country's problems, clearly by saying the budget's going to be painful, is basically a code for saying we're going to raise your taxes even higher, right? Taxes are at an all-time high, the highest since the Second World War, and that is pushing people who are wealth creators out of this country. As I've told you, you've had tons of millionaires leaving this country, right? You've got people with a bunch of wealth who they're paying often well over 50% tax. That's like working over 6 months of the year for the government. And they get nothing in return, right? Because, the health service doesn't work, the streets aren't safe and all of this, right? And they can go to, they could go to somewhere like Dubai and pay no tax, or they could go to another country, they could go to France, they could go to whatever, other European country perhaps, or go to the US or wherever, where they might be paying a similar tax rate or a bit lower than here, but actually everything works in the country. So why the hell wouldn't they go, right? All he's doing is pushing people out of the country. So this idea that if we raise taxes, that's going to help us to grow the economy again, I mean, it's just completely and utterly backwards. So the idea that if we do this now and we make it painful for people now and we take even more of their money out of their pay packet, and to be honest, it is usually, I'm talking about millionaires here, but it's usually the middle classes that end up paying a huge proportion of their tax. And these are not people who have got a ton of money to splash around, and they are struggling to pay their mortgages and look after their kids just as much as many other people. It's not just the working classes that are struggling. I think if we make it worse for them, that it will be better in the long run, and that will grow the economy. I really do not see this happening. I see this sort of horrendous cycle where the economy is failing, so we raise taxes more to try and make up for the lack of money we have in the bank, and then raising the taxes more means we push more wealth creators out of the country, and then the economy gets worse, and then we raise them even more, and we just keep going around in this circle, and it's just not going to work. So all of this rosy stuff that he says we're going to have in the long term, I'll believe it when I see it. He talks there about, say, privatising the railways, introducing Great British Energy, all of these things, right? Just presuming that they're going to work. I mean, I'm sorry, it's not going to be all smooth sailing. I mean, time will tell if having a new rail operator improves the rail service, but I don't think it's suddenly going to make the country work like absolute clockwork. And if it does work long time, like it's going to take a long time to be established. I highly doubt there will be a huge difference between this and the current railway service that we have. It's really, I've had enough of it. So that's Keir Starmer's speech. He's not the most exciting guy to listen to, but it's important that we at least had listened to what he had to say to see what horrendous things he's going to do to us over the next few years. I'm Chloe Dobbs. This has been another video for Reason. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, press the notification bell. There's going to be a lot more politics going on after Parliament goes back next week, so there's going to be a lot going on this channel and you don't want to miss it.